The 2022 elections really matter this year. But the primaries to determine who's going to be on the ballot in November are happening in August. Here's what you need to know. Thank you for watching. My name's Glen Morgan, and this is We the Govern. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is the 2022 elections. Everybody's been paying attention to it. A lot of things are going on nationally. A lot of national issues are going to be affecting local races, and it is worth mentioning that the primary is coming up in August, and a lot of people forget about the primary. Based on the election results that we've had for many years, sometimes you only get a participation rate in that 20 to 30% range, which isn't very much. It means that your vote really counts even more in the primary than it does in the general. But what happens? What happens is in the middle of the summer, because those ballots are coming out right about now, or about the time you're watching this video, if you don't have your ballot yet, you're going to have it shortly. The local auditors will mail it out to you, and then what happens? Well, if you do what I've done in the past, you'll get it and maybe you forget about it. You set it and you're going on vacation, you're camping, you're dealing with summer issues that are a lot more fun than elections for most people, and you just don't get that ballot in. So for those of you who actually do want that ballot to count, I suggest you get it and fill it out early and then drop it off in a post office or in a mailbox as a drop box as soon as you can. I don't recommend actually using the post office as much as I'd use the drop boxes. So don't forget to drop it off. Just stick it in that box, and the way I usually do it is just try to wait till the last couple days before the election. It's coming up that first week in August, so get it in there maybe the last day of July. Just get it dropped in, and then at least your vote gets counted. If you live in King County, maybe it counts more than once. But the point is that your vote does matter, and it matters a lot more in the primary because the participation level is not going to be as high as it will be in November. And what happens in the primary is what determines who's going to be on that November ballot. So let's look at a couple of these higher level races, the congressional, the federal races. We'll start there for this video and let's talk about them. Because the headline race that you're going to see on the ballot, everybody in Washington State votes for this position, is for the U.S. Senate seat. And you have right now incumbent Senator Patty Murray, who's a Democrat. She's been fossilized in office for decades. She's been there since the early 90s. And the question is she going to go back to D.C. for another 6 years? She was voted one of the stupidest senators in Washington State, or in the nation, actually, by staff for many years in a row. I don't know if they still do that survey anymore, but if they do, then she seems to continually win it. And she's being challenged this year by a challenger, Tiffany Smiley, who comes out of Eastern Washington and really has a very impressive story and has just done an amazing job running a campaign. This has been one of the more serious Republican campaigns for a statewide office like this that I've seen in a long, long time. So the Republicans haven't had a Senate seat since the late 90s, and so it's really a big deal if we have a really good candidate who's running for office. But here's what you need to watch for in the primary. These are the things that we have to pay attention to, because we do have a top two primary system, which means only the top two vote getters in August are going to come through and be on the ballot in November. And lest anybody have any delusions that these are going to be the top two. They're the only serious candidates on the ballot right now, and there are 18 candidates there, but it's going to rapidly become two after the August primary. However, and part one of the ways you can kind of tell is that these are the only two candidates who've raised any money. They've both raised millions of dollars. Of course, the incumbent senator has an unlimited pot of cash to draw from. And the challenger, Tiffany Smiley, much harder path to raise money, and yet she's raised millions of dollars. So we really see a serious race coming there. Nobody else has come even close, and nobody else is that serious. But the big question when the primary comes out and the election results come out in August is the percentages. What the percentages are for both the incumbent and the challenger. If Murray is at 51% or lower, she's in trouble. And that's going to draw in all kinds of national money for a Senate seat that the Republicans potentially could pick up, and on the other side that the Democrats will have to defend. So a lot of money would come into Washington State for these races if she's at 51% or lower. And also the same thing would happen if Smiley's at 45% or higher. And so really what we're seeing is that both of these candidates are going to be striving to get the best percentage they can in the primary, not because it changes the fact that they're going to both be on the ballot in November, but because those percentages really matter. And it indicates to insiders and to big money and to donors and to volunteers and just enthusiasm for the campaigns exactly who's in the poll position moving forward. So this is a race to watch, and this is why your vote will count a lot. No matter where you live in Washington State, this is going to be one of the key elections and the top person that you vote for on the ballot. Let's talk about some other congressional races, about who's going to represent us in Washington, D.C. The 8th Congressional District, which is kind of the middle part of Washington, it takes in some of Pierce County, some of King County, goes over the mountains into Ellensburg and some of in Chelan and that area. And this is the most likely congressional seat of the 10 that Washington State has that partisan control may change. The incumbent right now is Democrat Kim Schreier. She's been there for a couple cycles, and she's got a handful of serious Republican candidates that are running against her. Again, this is another race. You've got about 8 candidates, but 4 of them are serious. And the only question is which of these 4 are going to come out, and it could be very close, which of them are going to come out to challenge Kim Schreier in November. You have Jesse Jensen, who was the Republican who challenged Kim Schreier last time and got very close in the election in 2020. You have Matt Larkin, who was a Republican candidate in 2020 for the Attorney General's office. He actually won this district if you look at the votes that he got for that race. You have Reagan Dunn, who's a King County councilman and kind of comes from a Republican dynasty. His mom was Jennifer Dunn, the former congresswoman there, big in the Republican Party for many, many years. And newcomer Scott Stevenson, who lives in Falls City, is an Amazon employee, mostly a self-funded campaign at this point in time. But these are the 4 most serious Republican candidates, and only one of them is going to come out of the mix in the scrum in November. So we have to see what these results are. Again, which Republican survives the primary. That's going to be what August decides, and it's going to be probably fairly close, very tight race potentially. And then, of course, the other question is going to be, what is Congresswoman, the incumbent, what is Kim Schreier's percentage? If she's less than 50% in particular, this is going to draw tons of money in from national money will come in, a lot of PAC money will be spent because this is one of those seats that controls and influences who controls the Congress back in Washington, D.C. And it's the one that's considered most likely to change in Washington State. So paying attention to the Congressional 8th District is a big deal. Of course, all the other 9 districts are also on the ballot, and let's see which of those has something going on, because there's some different things. It depends on which race you're looking at. There are 2 currently seats that are held by Republicans. One's in the 3rd Congressional District, which is Southwest Washington. That's my district. That's where I vote. I live in the very, very top of that congressional district. And the other is going to be in the 4th Congressional District, which is kind of the middle of Washington State in eastern Washington, kind of a north to south district there. And those are held by 2 different incumbents. The Southwest Washington, my congresswoman is Jamie Herrera Butler. She's a Republican. Again, incumbent Dan Newhouse has been elected just a couple times, and he is the incumbent of the 4th Congressional District. Here's the thing about these 2 races. Nobody expects them to have a partisan change, which is why nationally they don't get the same kind of attention. But within the state, they're getting a lot more attention for one primary reason. Both of these Republican incumbents voted to impeach Trump. And that drew the ire and attention of a lot of pro-Trump Republicans, of a lot of conservatives, of a lot of people in the state who were very angry about that vote and the decisions that these 2 Congress people made that's not popular with their actual constituents. And so that drew a ton of challengers. 11 people are challenging Jamie Herrera Butler. You have 6 challengers against incumbent Dan Newhouse. Most of those are Republicans in both cases. So generally what that means, we do have a top 2 primary system. So the question is, will one of these challengers not only outperform the incumbent, but will they outperform the plethora of other challengers that have jumped in that race? In the case of Jamie Herrera Butler, she's got 3 challengers. Probably generally based on polling, it looks like Joe Kemp might be the lead challenger there, but you also have Heidi St. John and former Representative Vicki Kraft that are running running. Those are 3 serious candidates out of the 11, and that tends to divide up the opposition vote to the incumbent. And also in Dan Newhouse's case, you have Jared Sessler, who is a businessman and a race car driver in Eastern Washington, and also former Republican candidate Lauren Culp is also running, as well as Representative Brad Clippert down in Benton County. Those are probably the 3 leaders in the challenge against Newhouse. And so this is really an intramural fight between Republicans and whether a challenger has the ability to overcome an incumbent, and especially considering that top 2 primary system that Washington State has. The Democrats, and there is a Democrat challenger in both races, they're going to get a pretty good chunk of change. If you're a Democrat, you're going to vote for the Democrat, and that's going to be 40% or 35%, depending on the district, of the vote. And again, you have to get 33% or more to probably get to that primary. So this is going to be a real challenge to see if there's any changes, and regardless if there is a Republican challenger that is able to overcome the incumbent, then it doesn't really affect the partisan makeup in Washington, D.C. So it just doesn't get the same kind of attention. But these are 2 big battles that everybody's going to be watching in August to see how the primary actually goes. Now, there's also other races that are worth paying attention to, and these are going to be incumbent Democrats who the big question will be, does the red wave actually impact these guys? Because generally right now, political insiders are going to be presuming that these 5 guys and gals here, that they're actually going to be the safe seats because they're the incumbents. Starting left to right at the top. Suzanne DelBene, she's a Democrat up in the 1st District, which is kind of that northwest Washington. She's been there for a while. She's had some serious challengers in the past, but she really is a big fundraiser, and that district is generally considered fairly safe for her. So, but again, if her numbers are bad, that's going to be putting the other incumbents on notice. Derek Kilmer in the center, kind of the goofy guy with glasses there, he's the 6th Congressional District congressman, and that takes mostly the peninsula going down to Tacoma there. And that district has been getting a lot more conservative. So he's going to be people are going to watch very carefully what his numbers are in August. And if it looks rough, he may be in trouble. Rick Larson, the guy on the right, the top balding guy on the right here, is in the 2nd Congressional District, also up Northwest Washington. And again, another person who has had some narrow wins in the past. And then also down below to the left is Marilyn Strickland. She's a former Tacoma City Council member, and she's in the 10th Congressional District, which covers Olympia and Southwest Pierce County. Heavy veteran area, and actually more conservative than people realize. And then you have Adam Smith, the perpetual fossilized in office congressman from the 9th Congressional District, which is South King County and North Pierce County area. And these are the guys that basically, depending on what happens in the election results in August, this is going to determine whether these races start to get a lot more attention. Do they get less than 51%? And does the Republican challenger appear serious in these situations? Unlike the other races that I've discussed, there aren't a lot of challengers in this case, but there is at least one serious Republican candidate who is running against all 5 of these people. And if the election results in August go in a direction that it indicates that there's a serious red wave coming, some of these races are potential surprises that could come out there, and it would be what the insiders would not see coming. Now, anybody that's paying attention to my channel knows I don't spend a lot of time on federal congressional races or what's going on in Washington, D.C. I tend to pay more attention to what's happening in Washington State. And my video next week will deal with the races that are happening in Washington State at the legislative and the state Senate level a lot more in detail. However, for right now, the big thing to remember is that control of, and this is partisan control of the House and the state Senate, are up in the air right now. And polling shows both from the Democrat side and the Republican side that the Republicans have a really good shot of snatching victory this particular cycle for the first time, where they could control both houses, at least the first time since 1998. So that would be a big deal if that happens. And again, what happens in August is going to determine which candidates come out of the primary, and also the primary results are going to impact all these campaigns for November, because both the incumbent and challenger August results, again, are going to dictate donor decisions, campaign enthusiasm, who's got momentum, all kinds of different data like that is going to be drawn from the August primary. And again, with such low participation historically, that's why the higher participation rate right now really does matter. So again, pay attention to your pamphlet, your voter's pamphlet, read up on these candidates that are running for office. I'm going to do a video next week where I cover a lot more of the state races because I think there's a lot of important state races around the state to really pay attention to, especially on the House and Senate side, but we also have a Secretary of State race that's up. So there's a lot to look at. And if you're a Republican or conservative voter, this is a time to really pay attention. And it's also the time to vote. Because if you don't vote, then what you think doesn't really matter. You just have no impact at all. It doesn't really matter what you think or what you want to have happen because you did nothing to make any kind of an impact or difference. And despite all the challenges that we've had with our election process, anybody who's paid attention knows I've covered some of these subjects in the past, and I'm actively working on some of the solutions, I hope, for some of our concerns moving forward. But you still have to vote, you still have to participate. And even though it's in the middle of August and there's a lot of other things, going to the lake, going camping with the family, all kinds of things that are interrupting the election time frame, that still, don't forget it, grab that ballot, get it in, and make sure you vote. Voting matters, and it's gonna matter this year, I think, quite a bit. So with that, thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to learn more about any of these people, I have linked a ton of links down below so that you can go there and look at these people for yourself. And if you want any comments or you think I've missed anything, please add that down below. I do read those comments and I try to get back to you as best I can. And just remember, the future belongs to those who show up and, frankly, those who vote.